When people first start learning about perfume, they usually focus on the beginning, the opening, the bright part, the fresh citrus, the first impression, because that's the easiest thing to notice. But something strange happens if you spend more time with fragrance. You begin to realize that the opening disappears surprisingly fast, sometimes in minutes. And yet, the perfume still feels like itself, which raises an interesting question. If the top notes disappear so quickly, what are you actually smelling for most of the fragrance's life? The answer is usually the heart notes, or what perfumers traditionally call the middle notes. And despite the name, they're not really in the middle. They're the personality of the fragrance. The idea of heart notes appeared when perfumers realized something important. People don't emotionally connect to the opening of a perfume as much as they think they do. They connect to what stays after the initial impact fades. Think about meeting someone for the first time. The opening is like the first impression, fast, bright, attention-grabbing. But the heart is the conversation that follows. It's where character appears. This is why many fragrances can smell impressive for the first few seconds and then suddenly feel empty because the transition into the heart is weak. And experienced perfumers know this. In fact, some fragrance creators say the true quality of a perfume is revealed not in the opening, but about 20 minutes later, when the top notes are gone and the structure underneath has nowhere to hide. Historically, heart notes became especially important during the rise of French perfumery in the late 19th and early 20th centuries. That's when perfume stopped being just pleasant-smelling oils or simple floral blends and became something more architectural. Perfumers started designing fragrances like emotional journeys, and the heart became the emotional center of that journey. Most heart notes come from florals, spices, greens, herbs, and soft fruits. Things like rose, jasmine, lavender, cardamom, geranium, ylang ylang. But here's where people misunderstand fragrance again. A rose note in perfume often smells almost nothing like a real rose, and jasmine in perfumery can smell creamy animalic green, even slightly dirty depending on how it's constructed. That's because heart notes are rarely literal reproductions. They're interpretations. One of the most famous examples is Chanel No. 5. Most people think of it as a floral perfume, but the fascinating part is that its florals were intentionally abstracted using aldehydes. Ernest Beau, the perfumer behind it, reportedly wanted the fragrance to smell less like a realistic flower bouquet and more like the idea of femininity itself. That was revolutionary at the time. Instead of recreating nature, perfume started creating moods and identities, and the heart notes became the emotional language of those ideas. Another interesting example is Dior Fahrenheit. When people first smell it, they often focus on the unusual gasoline-like opening, but the emotional core of Fahrenheit comes from the heart. Violet leaf florals, leathery accords. That strange balance between soft and industrial is what gives it personality. Without the heart, it would just smell shocking for a few minutes and disappear into nothing memorable. What makes heart notes difficult for beginners is timing. Most people smell perfume too early. They spray it, smell immediately, and decide whether they like it. But in reality, they're mostly evaluating the opening. The heart usually appears after 10 minutes, 20 minutes, sometimes longer depending on the composition, which means many people have never actually experienced the true character of the fragrances they own. And here's another thing that surprises people. Heart notes are often designed to influence emotion more than attention. Top notes grab you, base notes support the structure, but heart notes shape mood. That's why certain fragrances can feel calming, nostalgic, romantic, clean, melancholic, even when you can't explain why. Your brain reacts emotionally to the center of the composition long before you consciously analyze it. Modern neuroscience supports this idea. Studies suggest that smell is deeply connected to emotional prediction systems in the brain, meaning before you consciously identify a scent, your brain is already deciding whether it feels safe, comforting, luxurious, energetic, or unfamiliar. And heart notes play a huge role in that emotional interpretation because they remain present long enough for the brain to build associations around them. So how do you actually learn to recognize heart notes? The biggest mistake is trying to isolate ingredients too literally. Instead, start noticing transitions. Spray a fragrance and smell it. Immediately after 15 minutes, after 45 minutes, pay attention to what changes. Ask yourself, what became softer? What disappeared? What stayed emotionally consistent? That consistent emotional core is usually the heart. Another useful exercise is comparing fragrances with similar openings but different hearts. For example, two fresh fragrances may open with citrus, but one becomes floral and airy, while another becomes spicy and warm. That difference is often the heart structure revealing itself. And eventually, something interesting starts happening. You stop experiencing perfume as one flat smell. You begin noticing movement, development, texture. You realize fragrance is not static. It evolves over time like music changing mood between verses. And heart notes are usually the part your brain remembers most, even when you don't consciously notice them. Because in many ways, the heart of a fragrance behaves a lot like the heart of a person. First impressions matter, but they're rarely what stays with you the longest.